This is Mission Qualfon, a monthly podcast that takes you inside the workings of our company, but not just the ins and outs of business. We look at the ideas and insights that make Qualfon truly unique. As a company, we are committed to being the best and making each person's life better. Join us as we get to know and learn from people from across the organization. What's their story? What have they learned? And how do they live out Qualfon's mission? Welcome to Mission Qualfon.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the Mission Qualfon podcast listeners. We now have a fan base, Jeremy.
That's exciting.
Is it? It's slightly exciting, slightly horrifying, but yes, we are starting to, it's not really starting to, I guess, I don't know. We had a huge spike. We had Angel Posada last episode, and I can't tell you why, which is going to keep me up at night. And
I do know, based on the 10 reports you've pulled since then, that we are getting a lot more listeners, aren't we?
It's yes, I know, I'm becoming a little obsessed. Yes, I'd like to know why, but I can't. I haven't been able to figure out why we've had such a spike in listeners. So, but it's exciting and it's great, and welcome everyone. We have a special episode this episode, Jeremy. We're doing things a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. This is a first for us. This is the first time we have multiple guests on one episode.
Yes, we have 3 of our mission leaders from the country of Guyana, where we have 2 sites.
Well, it's one site, but 2 huge call centers in the same site, basically. Mm-hmm.
We have Sherwin, welcome, who is an operations director, Rauls Toney as well, the other site's operation director, and we have Luana Persaud, who is country director. And the reason we have 3 of them is, well, a couple of reasons. I wanted to learn a lot about Guyana, and at this point, we're already out into, I think, March for scheduled interviews. So, we wanted to see what it was like to have multiple people on the podcast. It's not something I've done, really. This is a new, I've maybe had 4 people on a podcast once. So it was interesting. It was an interesting experiment.
I've never had more than one person on a podcast. So for me, this will be very interesting. And I'm looking forward to it being more of a group discussion than when we're usually just talking to one person. So I think that'll be great. And I just have to say, having had the opportunity to visit Guyana probably about 6 times, I think I've been there about 6 times. It's just a wonderful country, and the people are very friendly. The culture is fun. It's fun. And here's one thing I want to tell you about Guyana, which was a surprise to me. Not in the office, not in the workplace, but every other place in Guyana, there's music playing. Seriously, everywhere you go, you hear music playing. And that to me just kind of, it's a metaphor for the culture, right? I mean, and I'm not talking about necessarily Guyanese music. It might be dance music. It might be electronic music, but music everywhere. I mean, you're at the hotel, you hear music playing. You're out on the street, you hear music playing. So that's just the way it is. It's just a very upbeat culture.
The whole episode when they were talking, everything that you guys said, I partially because I haven't been able to travel in a while, but I just want to go so badly. It just sounded, and you could just kind of tell, in their personalities and everything. It was just like, oh, these are just lovely people. Mm-hmm. So here's the interview with some of our greatest mission leaders of Guyana. And this week, I'm super excited to welcome 3 of our mission leaders from the country of Guyana. We have Sherwin, welcome, Luana Persaud, and Rauls Journey. Welcome, guys. How are you?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Thanks for asking.
Great. Thanks for coming. I want to jump right in and ask a question first for Luana. Now, Luana, I have heard, you tell me if this is correct, you were the first employee in Guyana. Is that correct?
That's correct. Actually, I started in the company close to 15 years ago, and I started my journey as a recruitment coordinator as well as a business development analyst. It has been quite an adventure because over time I've had the good fortune of learning and working in various departments, and everything has been very exciting. Learning new things and interacting and serving the people of Guyana has been more so a privilege.
What year was that, Luana?
November 2005, and to be more precise, I started on November 7th of 2005, and commercial operations began in the country around November 23rd, 2005. And at that time, Qualfon started on a very humble journey with only 25 employees. And by the first year of commercial operations, would have grown tremendously, surpassing business plans projections, and also gaining its first award in the country for being a premier employer.
You know, in one of the podcasts, I believe it was with Mike Morrow, he mentioned how some people don't know where Guyana is. And I'm embarrassed to say that I was one of them. I actually thought it was somewhere else geographically. Can you tell our audience more about Guyana?
Sure, Marisol, will be honored to. So Guyana is a country in the South American continent. It's the only English-speaking country in South America. It has a population of around 750,000. It's home to the world-renowned waterfalls, the Kaitur Falls. It's the tallest single-drop waterfall in the world. And Guyana is making a name for itself as of recent with the discovery of oil.
Wow, that's exciting. Sherwin, could you tell us how you came to Qualfon, a little bit about your journey? But I do have a specific question for you, which is, I did hear that, like me, you came to work for Qualfon, you left Qualfon, you went some other places, and then you came back to Qualfon. So I was kind of hoping you could tell us a bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. So as Luana mentioned, Qualfon started in 2005, and I was fortunate to be part of the second batch that started in December of 2005. An interesting thing is that on my first try in applying to work at Qualfon as an agent, I wasn't successful, to be honest. I was asked to try again within a week's time because they've already met the head count at that point. And I tried again, and at that point I did get through. So I was part of the second batch, which was exciting for me. And what happened was it was different for Guyana at that point. I think we only had one other call center in the country, and it was not a very familiar industry at that point. So I was at my second year at the university and being an agent at the same time. And I was very fortunate with a lot of luck also to be part of the first account. I participated in all of the departments from training to operations. In my first year and a half, I was appointed to be the operations manager, which was exciting for me. And I did that for a while. So when I started as an operation manager, the site had about 200 employees, and we were fortunate enough to be successful in client delivery and recruitment, and growing that account to over 1,500 persons. And I was appointed site director after my ninth year at Qualfon, continuous year, and I was a site director for 1 year. And an interesting thing was, at that point, me working 10 consecutive years, I started to ask myself, some questions about how do I improve from where I am how am I going to be able to, to help others to have the same level of fortune and success as I did.
Sure. And let me interrupt really quickly. How old are you at this point?
34 years old at that point. And I've never disclosed this to many persons or my close friends and family. But at the point, I really did want to leave Qualfon to return to Qualfon. So my thought process was, if I can get enough exposure, not only subjected to the Guyana demographic and how everything works here, but to see the world in a different way from different programs and so forth, how I can come back and contribute towards Qualfon, because I've always felt attached. So I guess my long-term goal was really to return.
Can I just interrupt to say that that's not what happened to me, but that's an amazing story. Like to intentionally leave to come back to be better is, I wish I could say that, but that's awesome, Sherwin. So thank you for sharing that.
No problem. I think that my journey is pretty unique, and I've had the fortune of being motivated and encouraged by a lot of persons. Even on my last day, I got a phone call from the chairman to say, if at any time you want to return, remember there's always a home here at Qualfon for you. Mm. And after I finished that phone call with the chairman, I got a phone call from the CEO, and he was like, if you ever feel homesick, we're here with arms wide open, which was very encouraging to me.
And that didn't happen to me. That's awesome, Sherwin.
I know. It was pretty exciting. I told my family, and they were like, that they didn't understand why I was doing it, and which was interesting, because I went to the Caribbean. I worked with a company in Barbados and Grenada for a few years. And every time persons ask me about, hey, tell us about the company you worked for, and I was explaining to them how very people-centric it was, they were like, so then why did you leave again? And they always feel excited about when I tell them about my journey through Qualfon. So after a few years out, I thought it was time for me to return. I thought that I fully understood not only the Guyana demographic and how things work, but the close surroundings in the Caribbean, and how other BPO works, specifically in Guyana and in the Caribbean. And I wanted to use that knowledge to help not only myself to get better, but to contribute to Qualfon, who helped me in the beginning to elevate to where I was. Today, if anyone asks me to explain myself and the BPO industry, I always say that I am an employee of Qualfon for 15 years, and I'm the only person who had a 3-year vacation.
Well, that's one of the questions I was going to ask, is how many years you were away, and it was 3 years. But Sherwin, I think your strategy, even though other people might not understand it, is you learn something from every company you work for, and sometimes maybe the lesson you learn is, I never want to work for a company like that again. But you learn something from every organization that you come in contact with. So I'm sure you are much better and more knowledgeable for having spent that 3 years away, and then able to bring those things you learned back to Qualfon, which is awesome. So Rawle, you're an operations director, and I would love to hear your story. You guys have such interesting stories here at Qualfon. So share with us a bit what brought you to Qualfon and what your story has been since coming to Qualfon.
Sure thing. So I guess my story is kind of different. Coming out of high school, a year later, I'd say a little bit of vacation after high school, I needed something to do, right? So in my head, I'm like, what is it that I can do? Think about something that I appreciate doing. And I was interested in, how the computer works, how you are able to interact with folks, kind of like the full-fledged communication. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine, he was like, hey, Rauls, there is a company that's open that kind of meets some of your needs, right? Things that you like to do. So I'm like, yeah, let's give it a shot, see how it works for a couple of months. Let's see how that works. So it happened that I came on, did the interviews, went pretty well. Then I met with Luana at the time, as she would have been completing the interview. I was just about, I think, a couple of days before I would have turned 18. But I guess there was something special that Luana saw in me at that time that allowed me to pass through the gates to be able to join Qualfon a year after they would have launched, right? So that's where it started. Even at that time, I'm like, you know what? I'll still give it a couple of months. But during that time, there were so many different things that happened with the company and with the people that we work with. The dynamics of it just became different to me. And I actually fell in love with the business. Even though at that time it was very young and I expected it to develop year over year, I started to fall in love with, the call center industry and, how we really treat customers. So customer experience became a big thing for me. So I started to strive for that. A year passed and I'm like, well, I'm still here. So that's why I'm like, you know what? I need to work on how I can elevate myself within this industry. Seek persons who can help me be a better version of myself through, looking at other leaders and see how that's driven. And so said I did just that, and years would have passed. I'm running almost 14 years now, and within my early stages, I would have been moving from one position to the other within about 18 months or so. So I, like Sherwin, I've ran through a couple of departments, which runs from quality to operations, client services, and definitely being within operations. It's kind of where I fell in love even more with the organization and the business.
The three of you just here, because I haven't met any of you. I've seen your names. I've we've been on maybe meetings together, email exchanges, but I don't know you. And hearing your stories, the overwhelming sense I get is it's like this perfect little example of the total vocation that we constantly talk about at Qualfon in our mission.
Yeah, and I think what is interesting with all three of these folks is they've all worked in a lot of different roles. You guys have a very broad experience base, and Sherwin, even with other organizations during that time. So that's very interesting to me. And I would like to ask, and I'll start with Rawle since he was speaking last. When you look back at the 14 years you've been here, what is it about Qualfon? What's the thread? What's the theme that keeps all of you here?
Ultimately, I believe that just the family-oriented feeling you get when you enter the building and the relationship that we would have built over the years. I think we're no longer just colleagues. We're more like a family at this point, right? So that by itself, as I leave my family at home, I just feel at home being here as well. So it makes it easier for me to do my job.
That's like the world's most perfect answer. I honestly, it's like I want to move now. I was like, Guyana sounds amazing, sounds awesome, and the stories that you guys told about how you started and how long you've been there and the different positions that your career took. The story of the chairman and the CEO calling, that's just, I don't think Jeremy and I ever intended this podcast to be a recruiting tool for Qualfon. It certainly wasn't something that crossed my mind, but the way that you guys speak about, Guyana and the sites and the company, it's just really beautiful. So thank you.
Was Qualfon the first BPO in Georgetown?
Yes, back then, but however, in 2000, there was a BPO operating in the same building where Qualfon launched the first site. Okay. And I actually started in that BPO as a customer care representative back in 2000. So I had the honor of serving in the very first call center that opened in Guyana way back then. And when Qualfon came here in 2005, I actually got a call inviting me to come and be part of an interview. And I was recruited as the recruitment coordinator. I had the privilege of hiring many of the folks we see today in leadership positions. And I also served as a business development analyst, trying to assist and working through the various things that were needed to establish Qualfon in Guyana, and also to make the business grow in accordance with the business plan that was outlined.
So having spent as much time as you have at Qualfon, it's got to be a completely different world now than when you started, way back in 2005. What's the biggest change? I mean, what has that growth been like over the years, Luana?
It's been phenomenal. Actually, it's been a surprise as well. I mean, who would have thought we would have ventured this far? Starting back then, my intention per se was to stay with the company for 1 year and see how everything unfolds. And after that 1 year, I realized there's so much to do and so much to contribute back to the country and national development through job creation. So definitely the company has come a long way in terms of technological advancements, in terms of many tools that the employees so welcome today to make their jobs easier and enjoyable.
Jeremy, have you been to Guyana?
I have been to Guyana about 6 times. Yes.
I've never been. Describe it for me.
Guyana is, and you guys jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe about 95% of the country's population is right on the coast. They're right around Georgetown. Am I correct? That's where the majority of folks live. And you land at the airport, and it's, for me, someone who lives around pine trees, it's like something from a movie, because you see these beautiful trees that you've only seen on movies and TV shows, and it's just a beautiful, the scenery's beautiful. The people are beautiful. I mean, it's just a great place to visit.
No, I really want to go now. I really want to go to Guyana.
It's just a very unique, beautiful place to visit. I love it. I love going there, and I love pepper pot.
What's that?
It's yeah, it's this yummy dish, and you guys will have to explain what pepper pot is, but I think you can make it with chicken or beef or pork, I think, but it's just got this very strong seasoning and flavor, and I don't even know how you make it, but I just know that I've had it a few times, and it's delicious.
This is going to be a hard episode for the rest of us to listen to during these travel restrictions, because I really want to go.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Is there a Guyanese language that's not English?
Yeah, it's Creolese.
Creolese.
Guyana has a very rich cultural diversity, and you would hear Creolese mostly among the family groups or in some rural communities. It's a way of helping those families and those communities to bond and socialize and understand each other really well.
Because there's this rich melting pot of different cultures together, right? So we have, the French influence and the Dutch influence, British influence, and also the, African and East Indians, Portuguese and Chinese are all native of the land with the Amerindians. What Creolese really is if you melt all of those cultures together, and then someone if they speak a word, it'll be half of one culture mesh with another one. So sometimes if you're not from here, the word doesn't make sense to the outsider, but it has, some influence of English and Dutch and French and African and East Indian.
I'm a little bit embarrassed by my ignorance, to be honest, because, you would think that I would know more, but the way Jeremy described it, having spoken to you all and hearing about it, it's just also, it's a very interesting story. And I want to learn more, actually, about it. I want to go visit.
Luana, you mentioned oil. And for those that aren't aware, over the last few years, there have been big oil discoveries right off the coast of Guyana. And that has meant, a lot more oil business there. And that has meant things are changing in the country. And I'm wondering, Luana, if you could maybe talk to that. What will that mean for BPO work? What will that mean for Qualfon over the next few years as the economy continues to change and grow due to that oil?
Sure, Jeremy. That's going to put the country in a very transformational state. In a couple of years, the revenues garnered from the oil will be used to make significant improvements in infrastructure, as well as improving the lives of the citizens. There are going to be numerous social programs to support the families and the kids. So that's definitely going to be very impactful for every citizen of the country. In terms of the BPO industry, the BPO is an emerging sector, Qualfon being the single largest employer in Guyana. I think that augurs well for the BPO industry as well, as it's going to position it really well to attract more investment and even attract more people into the workforce. So all good things to come as a result of that oil discovery offshore Guyana.
Well, we could probably do a podcast. I mean, not probably. We could do a podcast, probably an hour-long podcast with each of you, because all of you are fascinating and have such interesting stories, and Guyana is fascinating, and I want to hear more about it. But we're already scheduled out into 2021, like end of the first quarter of 2021. And, you know, everyone was telling us we've got to get people from Guyana on the podcast, and we wanted to. So thank you all for coming on together and sharing your stories. I want to ask one last question, and that I'm going to ask it to Rawle, and that's, you know, the mission is something very important to many of us. How does the mission play out there? Like, how do you see it in your community, at your site?
So I think of it as, you know, kind of twofold. It's based on, you know, how we've been incorporating this into our lives, right? So the first part, which is going to be the best for me, we've moved from, or elevated from, accepting mediocrity, and we have to be able to really stand out to our clients, as well to our agents, our support staff, all of those guys that depend on us as leaders to make things happen for them day in, day out. And then there's the other part of it, which is make each person's life better. Individuality is kind of key for us. And as we sync up on site to talk about how we can work through that and ensure that our folks are well taken care of, and not just them, as we venture out into the communities, as we venture out into different areas that have different needs. It puts us in a different position from a corporate standpoint. I think at this stage, we're probably one of the companies that does it the best, right? And puts ourselves out there, not because it's something that can happen, is because we find the value in making sure that we're here and we're ready to take care of everyone and, you know, kind of their needs, as each person, of course, they have different needs. So I think it plays out really well for our company as well as our employees.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I can't wait till I get a chance to meet all of you in person.
Well, Marisol, that was a great conversation, and I loved 3 people on. I think it was great. And these are 3 leaders. I think Rawle might have been the newbie of the group, and he's been with Qualfon for 14 years. So these are leaders that have worked together for a long time. You mentioned how you love their accents, and I agree. I love it. I love talking to them. I love that accent. And one of the beautiful things about their language, I say language, they speak English, about their dialect. You remember we've recently moved, we've changed our mission statement. We've never talked about this. Our old mission used to be to make people's lives better. And over the last year, that has changed to make each person's life better. And we could do a whole episode just on why we made that change.
Well, you mentioned it. You've got to tell us.
Well, no, I'll tell you in context why I think this is so great about Guyana. But I mean, I think this deserves a fuller explanation than we can do at the end of an episode.
Okay.
But if you notice, all three of them, as we talk to them, they do not say people. They say persons. Okay, so they talk about what can we do to help the persons in the community. And that has always stuck out to me, even before we made the change as a company, that in Guyana, the focus was on person versus people. And I think that's a beautiful difference that they have in their language or in their dialect. And it ties in so well with what Qualfon has done with our mission, changing that focus from people to person.
I didn't know that. I noticed we had changed it. I noticed the wording had changed, but I hadn't been a part of discussion on that. So that is very interesting.
So we're booked through March, but we need to have a conversation about the difference between people and persons. I think that would be a great episode.
So we have Roberto coming back. I don't know if he's aware of this yet. He might be hearing this for the first time, but Roberto's coming back to end the season, our first season at the end of this year. So maybe that's a part of the conversation with him.
That would be great.
Yeah. I just wanted to say one thing about the interview with, I made a reference about the total vocation. I was a little bit dumbfounded, I have to be honest, when Sherwin was telling his story, because I was just like, it's just an amazing story. The thought process, of a young man to say, I love this company, so I'm going to leave it so I can be better for the company. If I sounded kind of dumbfounded, I was. So I think no, they're all the three of them. I can't wait to meet them in person. I don't know this to be true, and I don't want to be creepy, but I just felt like they were kind of the people you would give a hug to when you see them, if you saw them more than one occasion. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's another wrap for episode 14 of the Mission Qualfon podcast. And as always, we appreciate you listening. And obviously, I appreciate every download. Make sure to subscribe and listen to all our podcasts. And is there anything else I'm supposed to say, Jeremy, that I've now forgotten?
Oh, just say goodbye, Jeremy.
Bye, Jeremy.
Bye, Marisol. We'll see you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mission Qualfon. Remember, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Mission Qualfon.